This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Xcast. The truth is in here. My name is Kurt North and welcome along to our I Want to Believe Minute, where we go through the second X-File movie 1 minute at a time. We have reached minute 16. We're about to be introduced to Father Joe. And joining me is Luke Winch. Luke, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Kurt. It's good to be here. Good to be back on the Xcast once again. Good to be back on a minute by minute thing he did, because I think I was on the one for the Fight the Future, but quite a lot of that was looking at machinery and scenery. So I'm quite glad I've got some good dialogue heavy minutes this time.
Yeah, I think I've got quite a few in my discussions that I'm hosting, where they're quite deep and dark. I'm not quite sure what that says about me and what Tony thinks about me, but never mind. But we shall see. So we are going to be covering minute 16, but I suppose like we'd normally do for an episode, first 15 minutes of the film, I think, is probably the best way to go about this. And then maybe we'll, at the end of our run over the next few episodes, we'll get your general idea on what you think about the film. So what do you think to the first 15 or so minutes before we hit to come and see Father Joe here?
I Want to Believe is a film that I think I've appreciated over the years, because I think when I originally saw it in the cinema, I found it a little bit dull, maybe a little bit, but I think I appreciate it more. So yeah, the first 15 minutes, it is like an extended Monster of the Week episode, essentially. So you've got the beginning. I really, really liked. I liked the way that it was intercut with the FBI agents poking the ice and intercut with the FBI lady at home. I really like that aspect of it. And then, of course, our introduction to Scully at the hospital, leading up to her going to see Mulder with his fake plastic beard. So yeah, it's I like the way it's filmed as a kind of extended episode. It just looks very beautiful. It's very the lighting and the fact that they're back in Vancouver again, I think really lent towards this story very well, and we get a lot of that in those opening scenes and those opening 15 minutes. I've
talked briefly on the episodes before this, especially the first few minutes, where we get a lot of intercutting with the scene and Billy Connolly, and I probably will end up trying to do a really bad impression of Billy Connolly yet again, because that's going to be my thing for this event. But yeah, so there's a lot of things to really appreciate with this movie. Okay, yeah, so we're here to talk about minute 16, which is from minute 15 minutes to 15 minutes and 59 seconds, where we see Mulder and Scully approach the dormitory for the habitual sex offenders with Agent Mosley Drummy and Dakota Whitney. And it's an interesting moment and an interesting development where we've had the bit of the park and finding the arm and things, and now we're really getting into the kind of as you say, that cold open's kind of finished, and we're coming back into the events here. Billy Connolly is obviously playing this role, and we get introduced to him here. What I've picked up on this minute, and I don't know if you picked this up or not, but they're playing the Jeffersons theme tune. Okay, so the theme tune is from a comedy show back in, I think it was the late 70s, going into the early 80s. It was one of the biggest comedy shows for some time. It was maybe about 10, 11 years, I think. I think the final one, I remember that they didn't finish the show, and I believe they went back and did a final episode in 1985. But the Jeffersons theme tune is all about moving on up, and it was, and the actual show itself was about somebody who went from Queens to a really cozy apartment in New York, so that they were moving on up the ladder effectively. And I just find it really fascinating that they do this with Billy Connolly's character as someone who's an habitual sex offender, like they say with the dormitories here, that they would use something like the Jeffersons to kind of equate that to each other. So you've got, this idea that, that Father Joe is on the mend and he's actually sort of progressing himself through a period of redemption. It's certainly an interesting choice in music, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad you did the research on that because I know that Carter doesn't put songs or stuff on TV willy-nilly. There's always some kind of reason behind it, whether it's thematically connected to the scene or, whether it's connected in some way to the series as a whole. So I knew there must be a reason behind it, and the fact that you've done the research on that is great because I didn't. Yeah, it is interesting, because you can see it, he's going up in the world. I mean, he's come from a prison cell to quite a cozy looking home by the looks of it. And I kind of looked this up because they described it as like these dorms of sex offenders, and they police themselves in this little small community. And I found that fascinating and worrying at the same time. So I did do a little bit of a quick research into kind of what happens to sex offenders, because I know this is in Richmond, Virginia. So I looked specifically in Virginia what happens. And I came across this article basically about the fact that there isn't really a governmental system in place that helps sex offenders to be rehabilitated after their prison sentence is up. And there's actually a foundation. This is weird because of the connection with a song. The foundation is called Step Up, which basically helps offers accommodation and get back into education and support for released sex offenders. So that's a weird meta link there. So yeah, it was. I just found the whole concept of these dorms. I'd never really come across it before until this film. So Carter doesn't really put stuff in like that unless there's a reason, no matter how tentative the reason is. But he always does it.
Ironically, I've actually done some research as well on the same thing. I went a different route though. I went to the Criminal Justice Research Alliance.org, and a professor of criminal justice of the University of Missouri St. Louis, Beth Hubner. And it's everything you'd expect, really. It basically, it's more of a kind of an article, bit of research paper on sex offenders and into transitional housing. And the key findings, I'll just read the executive summary as such. It said, upon release from prison, sex offenders face large hurdles when seeking housing, including legislative sex offender residency restrictions on non-legislative barriers, such as offender stigma, housing shortages, and economic challenges. Three main pathways of sex offenders into transitional facilities, TFS, are a lack of resources, sex offender residency and supervision restrictions, and the transitional facility as a sanction or punishment. When transitional facilities intend to transition from prison to community, many sex offenders residents of TFs found living in the TF no more helpful than being in prison, due to residents' ongoing problems with drugs and alcohol and the feeling of an increased stigma due to their sex offender status. Although TFs were originally conceived as a short-term stopgap between prison and home, many sex offenders in this study found it difficult to leave the facility due to an inability to obtain employment and have adequate income to self-sustain. So yeah, so we've both done a bit of research there, but that is it doesn't come as much as a surprise that they get stuck in that kind of facility, really, just on the basis of the rehabilitation is a particularly strong issue, and I'm sure we'll talk about that over the next few minutes as well, about rehabilitation, redemption, and how people view things. So I think it's a really good starting point for our first episode together, really.
And of course, we get the first of Mulder's quips, because we get quite a couple over the next few minutes. But avoiding the activities room is his first one, which I do find rather amusing.
I mean, we've got a basis on, as I say, for the next few minutes that we're going to cover over the next few episodes. That within the first 10-15 minutes, when we do meet Mulder in the first instance, he's not engaged whatsoever. And what I find really interesting is that within these 5 minutes that we get to see him fully on board and like kind of invested in. And I've got some things on that. But yeah, it is intriguing to see that kind of develop over the next few minutes.
Yeah, your mind has gone like the same with mine. My last minute that we're doing together is literally all about how Mulder was so reticent and untrusting in the scene in the office, and by the end of the next 5 minutes, he is literally hungry for the investigation once again. And it's almost as though he's found himself again in this short space of time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just going back on the Jefferson thing as well, this idea of them moving up. What's interesting with the Jefferson example, I mean, I'm not one who's actually watched that TV show. I think I might have seen something when I was younger. But it is a TV show that deals with alcoholism, it deals with racial abuse, it kind of deals with a lot of dark subjects in a comedy kind of framework. And what I particularly think about this film is that the strength that I think it has is it goes in hard, on the subject matter. And I think that for me is also another akin to the Jefferson thing, because Chris Carter's not afraid to go here, not to go to someone who's literally has done something to 37 boys, and it's kind of like really kind of dark and horrible. But then it's obviously, we'll talk about it in the next few minutes, but just how much he's willing to go down that route in a film that's meant to be a summer, like not necessarily blockbuster, but a summer film, that you've got a film like this.
If you think back to the first 9 seasons, Mulder has engaged and often encouraged like these really horrible people who might be murderers or rapists, but because they might possibly have a supernatural power or something like that, he has purposely got close to them and purposely encouraged them in their ways. And it's always been a point of contention for Scully, because she has a very strict moral compass, and she's got a Catholic background. So that really comes into play in over these next few minutes as well.
Also within the scene, you talked briefly about the kind of the general look of it, the Vancouver-esqueness of it, and these particular the units that people are staying in here, the dormitory that they're staying in here. When we do get actually to the house, it is not backwards and coming forwards, I should say, because the amount of imagery that we see within the house itself, pretty much before we meet Father Joe, where we've got like religious items dotted around the dorm, just showing us signs of Father Joe's continued faith. We've got the prayer beads, and he mentions he's not been sleeping as well. So it's really leaning into that, that Father Joe still has his faith and still has his religion in this particular minute.
There's also like a little table next to the bed with a large amount of medication on, which actually isn't discussed in conversation with anybody, but it's there, it's in the scene. And I'm sure like Scully might like have a glance at that, and then have a kind of theory that maybe the medication is maybe some of the reason why he isn't sleeping. Maybe he's having these visions. It's never in a conversation on script, but it's there in the scene, and I find that really interesting.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't clock that. So this is why we do two-hander. The things you've got to like continue going to talk about 1 minute of footage, especially with an introduction scene. Had we not done our research, it would have been quite, what shall we say, lean.
Short.
Yeah, quite lean in
quite lean.
Yeah, quite lean in the episode altogether. Okay, then, so anything in this minute that you would like to mention at all? Anything else that I have not touched upon?
I think we've covered everything we can, really, in this scene. Okay.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. Join us for the next episode, where we will talk in a bit more detail about Father Joe. And until next time, remember, as always, trust no one.